Hi everybody, it's great to be back here again. Tomorrow it's Friday, Parashat Bamidbar. We'll be getting a new book of the Torah. We are celebrating Jerusalem Day. And in order to relate to the portion, I want to, of course, relate to Jerusalem Day as well. Of course, we have to show some ancient sources regarding it. But I'll go back, I want to tell a personal story where many years ago when I first moved to Israel, made Aliyah, my wife, Leah. So we came and we settled here in Itamar, this beautiful community. And I was looking at that time as a science major from the U.S. I graduated and got my degree, and I was moving in that direction of whatever it was in the scientific world. But our hearts, when we came to the land, we needed to fill our batteries up with Torah study, and I joined a program. Ended up spending many years, 13 years of Torah study in Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel. Virtually, with very smooth years. Of course, I had to take a break in between for my army service, but I was able to focus on one direction. I was part of this program, becoming a teacher, becoming a rabbi, and then I went beyond that in my studies. And I felt like I was in the Garden of Eden. It was just so beautiful. Again, we were living on very little. My wife was working, cleaning school, whatever it was in those days, a couple of caravans, and I would be teaching on the side, little martial arts, whatever we could do to get by. We were trying to do basic things, but we were surviving on the bare minimum. Of course, my blessed parents, remember them for always bailing us out if I had some issue. They were always there during those difficult times, as far as financial times, but we were the happiest things in the world, the two of us, and beginning our lives, building our families, and slowly life was going forward. And here I am, 13 years learning in yeshiva. And I started, again, very young. But one day, out of the blue, after the head of the program, we had a group of us, about 10 of us that were in this particular program. And he said, well, I want to let you know that it's over. What do you mean? What do you mean it's over? We were like shocked. Well, you guys, at the end of the year, they're ending this program that was subsidizing your learning. Now we were, again, I told you before, living on virtually nothing, but even that little subsidy was something important for us, right, to survive. But so I felt broken. I said, wait, what's going on over here? Also, we're being cast out, and so what are we going to do? Like, here we are, 13 years later, after beginning our Torah study program, and I was like so calm and complacent and relaxed over there. Of course, we had things around us with the terrorism and everything that went around us, but I'm talking about my daily life routine was pretty simple. And all of a sudden, wow, what am I going to do now? I have to find something to do in life. And it was a very frustrating, one of the greatest challenges of my life, because when I made Aliyah, everything went smoothly, 21 years. And all of a sudden I'm cast out and I'm saying, oh my goodness, Leah, my precious wife, please give me your advice. What am I going to do? And Leah was always able to relax me and say, Moshe, don't worry, everything will be okay. She is always, walks with Hashem, but learn from our wives. And, I said, you're right. I mean, God is leading me somewhere. And I can't, be upset about a change in my life. I have to take it as a blessing in my life, and really opened up many doors because I became a rabbi in high school. We were involved in setting up the yeshiva high school in Itamar, and I was able to educate many hundreds and hundreds of students throughout the many years that I'm a rabbi in yeshiva. And that wouldn't have happened if I would have remained in the benches of the study room, and it wouldn't have opened up those doors. But the 15 years that I was a teacher were remarkable years of my life, being able to influence the young generation and to have a tremendous impact on them, on their future, and showing them the love for the land and the love for Torah. That was a beautiful part of my life. And at the same time, with all the craziness on Itam, I had to get involved in politics a little bit. I became the mayor for 9 years, and there, and many years in the council at the same time, and many hats I wore, and having to travel abroad with our friends of Itamar all the time, things became very stressful in my life, so many things, and and over the years, I've sort of been guided to the direction of focusing on building Itamar, and together with being a light to the nations, focusing in that area. But all this has been one path. If I follow my whole path of all these years, it's in these directions which are similar, involved in education, building the land of Israel. They're all connected, but in different stages. And the first stage was sort of a preparation stage. And that gave me the strength and the energy to teach and to reach out and speak and do what I do. So that I saw, wow, when you're right there experiencing that shock of being cast out, you go into shock, you know what's going on. But you see at the end of the day, God is taking care of you. Walk with God. It's like a person has to go up, going with the stream of the flow. Go with the flow of the stream. Don't try to go, in reverse. Don't try to go against the flow. If you try to go against the current, it's going to knock you over. You're not going to be able to deal with it. But in reality, in life, sometimes even when you're going with the stream, you're going and trying to let God guide you in your life, you still come to different opportunities you have. And how do you choose? How do you know what the best opportunity to choose? And that has to do, of course, with your talents are. A person could be multi-talents in different directions, but he has to choose what he's best at. And that is really, God gave him those special gifts to help others with those gifts. If you choose what you're great at, you could really be a tremendous influence and a tikkun for the world by focusing on those areas that you're very good at. So that's one answer to the question that people have every day when they wake up. What am I going to do in this world? Why am I here for? What is my tikkun olam? And let God lead you to that, on your life, and flow and walk with God. But it's not so simple, of course, because sometimes it could be a situation where a person chooses a path. He's very successful and tremendously successful, But in reality, if he looks closely, he can say to himself, am I serving the dark side? In other words, everything he's doing it is for his own personal benefit, for his own personal development. And God forbid, it shouldn't remain in that way, because a person is too egoistic and worrying only about his self endeavors. What happens? How does he relate to the world, right? So in life, you need those stages of it's like incubating, you need that to build yourself up to do more later in life. But you have to one day realize that God is going to lead you in the direction that you have to make a choice. And you have to choose a proper direction to be an assistance and a tikkun, a rectification of the world for others. It's not always about yourself. It's an important stage in life for self-improvement and betterment and to work in spirituality all the time. But if it remains only a personal thing, then it's given to the dark side, because it's not, there to help others. It's a very important message as well. And of course, those who, God forbid, really walk really in the dark side. In other words, they choose in life totally the wrong things and get involved in bad things. We're not even talking about that. That's not the conversation we'll talk about it, because that's obvious and very clear. Now, why am I mentioning all this? Is because in the book of Numbers is exactly that. Is where we see that there are multiple stages on our walk in the desert, and each one is vital in the life of Israel. Now, we could have made them a lot shorter if we wouldn't have sinned with the sin of the spies. But we learned at the end of the day that every one of these spots, every one of these places that we stayed over, sometimes overnight, sometimes for months, they were vital. The amount of time was very, very important. The place we stayed was so important. So in each one, God is teaching us. Now, the question is, why does the book of Numbers have to mention these things that just seem to be a one-time event, right? One time traveling through this, we're not going to go back there again. But no, God is showing us in life, each one of us have to walk the desert. Every one of us have to go through these different multiple paths of life. And we have to realize that we're there to let Hashem guide us and to go forward and find our rectification. Now, if we look in the book of Numbers, which is focuses particularly on the travelings and the location, going to different locations, and it also focuses on purpose. What is our purpose in the world? As it talks about the tasks of the Levites, as we read about the tasks of the priests, Kohanim, the Leviim, and the different functions, Israel is divided into the prophets. It talks all about that, as we read about in the book of Numbers. And here we see that for example, we learn about Koach, we'll learn about that in the coming portions, where Koach, as an individual, tries to fight against his purpose in life. He wants something else. He's not satisfied as being a Levite. He wants to take over the position of Aaron, Aaron Kohen. So that what happens is when people are jealous and they have looking for honor, instead of being complacent in their function and doing to the utmost their gifts, what they have, they look in other areas and they try to, and they get jealous and they try to come against others. And that's the danger of, again, when a person doesn't realize that God has given him a blessing, God has given him a direction and a purpose in life, and you're trying to go upstream. You're going in the other direction against the flow, against the current, and you're trying to do something that you weren't chosen to do. And that is where, the terrible, downfall comes into place. As we saw with Korach, what happened, he was swallowed up. But our rabbis tell us, and here I want to lead us into a little bit about Jerusalem today. Our rabbis tell us that the sons of Korach repented. And in other words, they, at the end of the day, as we know, they repented, they learned to follow, to honor their purpose that they had. As we all know, they were singing in the temple as the Levites. And it was a very special individual that we're going to talk about now related to Jerusalem Day. It's all connected, comes out of that family, the line of the Korach line, which was Shmuel and Navi, Samuel the prophet. And we read about a fascinating story about Elkanah, his father, in the book of Samuel, where the Midrash talks about it and his amazing feat of getting people involved going to the temple. As it says, and I'll quote the Midrash in the Yalkut Shimoni, Midrash says like this: Elkanah v'ishto banav v'achyotav v'chol korvav v'haya maleh imo l'regel. Elkanah, the father of the prophet Samuel, he would take his wife and his children and his sisters and their relatives, and they would go to pay pilgrimage to the temple. And then it was in Shiloh. Ubaim velanim birchova shel ir. And as they're on the way to Shiloh, the tabernacle, right, was then in Shiloh at that time. So they would rest, and they make a family encampment, moving around, and they would rest in a particular place. Vaita medina margeshet, but the area where they camped overnight on the way to the trip to Shiloh, margeshet vayu sholim otam lechan telchu. They were asking, where are you going to? They would see Elkanah, the family, and they would say, where are you going to? You bring the picnic baskets and you're on the way somewhere. Where are you going to? V'omrim levet Hashem shebishilo. They would say, we're going to Shiloh, to the house of God. That's where we're going. Shemisham teitzei Torah u'mitzvot. From there, the Torah and the mitzvot will come out. Vatem lama lo tavo imanu v'nelech yachad. They said, why don't you join us? We're going to pay pilgrimage. Miyad enehem mishagorot dmaot. Immediately their eyes began to send out tears. They were crying. Omrim lehem nelech imahem. Let's go with them. V'omrim lehem hen. Yes, let's go. Ad leshana ba'a chamisha batim. Until next year, it wasn't only Elkanah and his family that was going, but now it was 5 houses. Leshana acheret asra batim. Another year was 10 houses. Until all of Israel was going now to visit the site of the tabernacle. Listen, it's fascinating. He's saying the way that Elkanah went this year, he wouldn't follow the same path another year. Why? Because he wanted to get everyone involved. God says to Elkanah, the father of Samuel, in your merit, you have brought Israel to the merit side. You weighed on the scale the merit of Israel. And you educated them in the commandments. And many were merited on your behalf. I will now bless you, and I will take a son out of you. Shiachriya et Yisrael. You will have a son that will bring the whole people of Israel for merit. V'yichanech otam, and he will educate them in mitzvot. Halamadata shebeschal Elkanah shmo. There we learn in the merit of Elkanah, Samuel, his son Samuel. So now why do I bring this midrash for? Of course, the concept that connects us with the portion very easily is the movement of the different locations. Just like traveling in the desert, they have a purpose. You're doing something. You're making an impression. Even in the empty desert, there's something going on everywhere you have to be in life. Every one of your stops in life. And here, Elkanah and his family, different sides of Israel, at a time when it was, after the period of Judges, there was a lot of idol worship. It was very weak spiritually, the people of Israel. And Elkanah was able to make a revolution, to turn the nation of Israel around and focus them on the tabernacle, on coming to the holy site of Shiloh. Now, of course, that was the beginning. Here, I want to move over to Jerusalem Day. Is that obviously these were part of our travelings. Whereas in the beginning of the desert, we were setting up the tabernacle. When we came to the land of Israel, there were different places where the tabernacle stood. For example, in the beginning, Gilgal and Shiloh, as we all know. And there were other locations in Givon, as we read about in the book of Shlomo. There were locations in Nov, for example. So the different places where we had the center of our Jewish avodah, worshiping Hashem, centers until, of course, we came to the city of Jerusalem, right, in the times of King David began, and of course finished by his son Solomon, Shlomo Melech, the holy place of our Beit HaMikdash. So each of these journeys, the having to move from one place, it was all part of eventually building. It's a process that takes time to go and build. But we see that in life we have to follow, and things are done in the stages. And as we walk, it's another step forward in that direction. And the beauty of walking with Hashem, and this is showing how we're walking with Hashem, is that we keep going, we keep going forward, we keep improving, we keep getting closer. Now, I want to show, and there's before I relate to this, a couple of fascinating sources over here from our sages. I want to quote relating, this week's portion is unbelievable. They're relating to Jerusalem. And I will quote and read some of them and we'll connect to them. Rabbi Elazar, I'll go back a little further here. I'll start with the previous page, but it's fascinating. They're all about stories that Jerusalem is written in Aramaic from the Zohar Kadosh, and I will try to translate it. Simchu et Yerushalayim, it's quoting the verse, Simchu, you shall make Jerusalem happy. Begin the chedva lo ishtakach, because happiness is not found, ela bezimna di Yisrael kaimei ba'ara kadisha. The Zohar Kadosh is saying that there's no true happiness, only, listen, you got to listen, it's fascinating, when the people of Israel are in the holy land of Israel. The taman itchabra iteta leba'ala. There, in Israel, the true connection between iteta, woman, and man, connects to a husband. In other words, this is referring to the relation between God, the Shekhinah, Israel, the divine presence, Shekhinah, and Hashem, in the creator of the universe. The Zohar Kadosh is saying, where does this take place? It takes place in the land of Israel. That is where this rejoice happens. Uchedeinu chedvata de kola, chedvata de eila vetat. And he's saying, then there is complete rejoice for all. Rejoicing in the upper worlds, rejoicing in the lower worlds. But he goes on to say the other side. Now listen very carefully. Bizmana di Yisrael la ishtekachu ba'ara kadisha. When Israel is not in the Holy Land, asir le levarnash lemechdei. A person is not allowed to be happy. When Israel, the people of Israel, are not living in the land of Israel, the Zohar Kadosh says you're not allowed to be happy. Ulachzar chedu dichtiv simchu et Yerushalayim vegilu ba. Rejoice in Jerusalem and rejoice within her. Gilu ba daika. What is he trying to say over here? He's saying that when Israel is in the land and they're dwelling on the land of Israel, so this would be the greatest feeling of happiness and perfection in the land, when the people of Israel are coming home to the land. But when they're outside, it's a catastrophe. And the Zohar Kadosh is stressing, and why is it in this portion talking multiple times about Jerusalem? And there's a couple of more sources I want to bring down. He brings a story. Rabbi Abba Chama bar Balnash Dechava Chadi Beveit Ronia de Bavel. It's the story of Rabbi Abba. He saw that someone in Babylon was very, very happy. And he was making all kinds of parties and totally overdoing it. Batashbe, he gave him a kick. Amarlo, he says to him, Simchu et Yerushalayim, it says, rejoice in Jerusalem. Bezimna di Yerushalayim bechedva bai balnash lemich. Because when Jerusalem is in happiness, then we can be happy. But right now, at that time, they were in Babylon. It was the destruction of the temple still, or Israel was still in exile at the most part. So he's saying, how could you be so happy? Where is your feeling of Jerusalem not being built? We'll go on. I'll do one or two more sources here. It says, Davar Acher, another thing he's saying, Ivdu et Hashem b'yirah, it says, worship God in fear. Da Knesset Yisrael bezimna di'i begalut b'nei amamaya. So he's saying, when do the Jewish people worship God in fear? That's when the people of Israel are in exile amongst the nations. That's when they're in fear. I think I could stop for a moment and mention this week, there are multiple videos coming out of in New York City and other places in the world of these constant demonstrations against synagogues, attacking Jews, anti-Semitic acts. The Jews are in fear in exile. This is really what the Zohar is saying on the portion. It so connects, of course, to the anti-Semitism in the world. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yehuda says, "V'aktiv ki b'simcha teitzeu." V'dai knes Yisrael kevan damar teitzeu min galutu v'ikri simcha. He's saying, they will leave and rejoice. It says in Isaiah 55. In other words, when we will leave exile, we will rejoice. Amar le v'dai hachu. Because surely that's the case. Similarly, listen, pay attention here. The chol zimna di'i begaluta u'shchivat la'afra. As long as we are in exile, u'shchivat la'afra. What does that mean? As long as these divine presence is in exile and is lying in the dust. In other words, when the people of Israel are outside of Israel, our divine presence is literally in the dust. Lo ikri simcha. It's not called rejoice, to be happy. Adekud barichu yeti legaba. Until Hashem will come, yeti v'yokim la me'afra. He will lift them out of the dust. V'yema itnari me'afar. As it says, we pay attention to the verse. It says, "Na'ari me'afar." Shake off the dust. Get out of the dust. Kumi ori. Wake up. Enlighten. Give light. B'yidchabun kechad, and you will come and join, combine. Kidein chedvata ikri. It will be called happiness. Chedvata dekola ukidein besimcha teisu vadai. In other words, and it goes on. It's fascinating. But he continues to talk about these amazing sources about Jerusalem. Now, the Zohar Kadosh, as we all know, was written by the holy Tana. The holy Tana lived in a time 2,000 years ago, right a little after the destruction of the temple, a couple hundred years after the temple was destroyed, in the beginning, again, of the period we call the Tanaic period, later on the Amorg period. And if we think about almost 2,000 years when these things were written and these things took place, we have merited in our lives to be witnesses to Jerusalem being reunited, the return of Jerusalem. Now, this very day of that Jerusalem has come back to us took place on the 28th of the month of Iyar. That same day that Samuel, I just spoke about a moment ago, that's the same day he passed away. Samuel, as we said, he came to rectify his Korach. He comes from the family line. And through his whole idea of strengthening making pilgrimage, coming to the tabernacle as his father did, but Samuel went another stage forward to anoint eventually King David, which will bring about the final redemption, which brought us to Jerusalem. So we see those stages of the rectification, how things unfold and how everything, God leads those in directions they have to walk in. And this is the same exact day of the day that God merited us in coming back to the land of Israel and re-establishing our state of Israel, and then in the 6-day war, giving us back Jerusalem on that same very day as Prophet Samuel passed away. How perfect and how exact these things are. And how the Zohar Kadosh talks about these things on this week's portion, which is literally the portion today. We're entering that, the book of Numbers, on this amazing day of Jerusalem Day, how connected everything is. To wrap this little discussion up, we have to, in our lives, open our eyes and see the divine providence, how Hashem walks with us. And I would say right now, and I want to end with this important message, is that I've seen this week, it's been, my wife is bombarding me with all these things she's getting on her Instagram, showing all these things, about these, so many anti-Semitic incidents in multiple places, and we see it all over the news, it's all over the place. If that is not God hinting to you in the direction that you have to walk to, my dear, dear Jewish brothers and sisters, you have to leave and come home. The time has come to see the light, the handwriting on the wall, and say, come back to Israel. God's saying, come now. I always say it's terrible. It shouldn't be done out of fear. It shouldn't be done out of reasons, that shouldn't be 100% from the heart to wanting to do the right thing. But nevertheless, in situations like this, where it's getting stronger and stronger, the anti-Semitism around the world, God is saying the time is to come home now, where true happiness, outside of Israel, you're going to have not true happiness, but when Jerusalem is rebuilt, as we see it being rebuilt in the land, Simchot Yerushalayim, be happy, rejoice within Jerusalem. Come back home to be happy, to give away, not to have to live in fear of the exile, but to live and walk proudly in your land. The land of Israel is waiting for you to come and join us. Shabbat Shalom, Besorot Tovot, Yeshuot v'Nechamot.